This is a magnetic drill, a so-called mag drill, most literal name for any machine ever, seeing as the two fundamental components are this magnet and this drill. The two are connected by this body, which includes this dovetail keyway that allows you to plunge cutters like this through dirty, thick pieces of steel with comparative ease using this inbuilt rack and pinion drive system. This is the best value mag drill that I can imagine for home DIY fabrication, farm type use, repair shops, things of that nature. And we'll get into the why of that in just a second. To be perfectly transparent with you, I did get this one for free. Vevor did send it to me to review. They're not having any say in what I say to you about it. I didn't really need another mag drill, like I already own 4, and including the predecessor of this. So this is just to confirm that this particular unit in the flesh lives up to the value and performance proposition that the specifications promise. And I've just unboxed it and taken it out and drilled the first 10 holes with it. We'll talk about that in just a second. One of the most impressive things about this tool is it's such an unbox and go proposition. Like, it takes you less than 5 minutes from picking up the knife to get it out of the box to drilling your first serious hole in a piece of steel. And that's if you take your time. And there's only 3 controls, right? So magnet on and off, drill on and off, tool up and down. You don't need a PhD to do any of that. I've got a lot of projects coming up that require a fairly serious amount of drilling in some pretty thick pieces of steel. So this will be a good opportunity to really put this through its paces. And obviously I've only drilled 10 holes in it just a few minutes ago, but it performed flawlessly. And I've had its predecessor for ages and it's gone pretty well as well. What I did was I've got this piece of 150 by 100 by 10 angle that I'm making a bracket out of, and it requires 10 holes. It requires 8 15mm holes for masonry anchors. I got these 12mm masonry anchors, and the 15 diameter holes will just give me some wriggle room on them. And then I've got these 2 27mm holes that I needed to drill as radius transitions for some straight cuts. Basically, it's a bracket that goes on the outside of a masonry wall, like an external corner, and then there's a cantilever piece that comes out at a funny angle. So what I did was I laid out all the holes first, because it's easier to drill the holes first and then cut it up into the 3 component parts than it would be to cut it up first and then dick around with 3 smaller bits of metal trying to drill them with this. So order of operations is pretty important with any job, and this was the order of operations that suited the whole thing for me. If you're not from around here, perhaps you are an American or some other imperial speaker, that piece of steel is 6 inches by 4 inches by 3/8 of an inch, more or less. So I know I'm only 10 holes in at this point, but I have had the predecessor in operation and it's still going strong, and I'd have to give this unit initially 13 points out of a possible 10 for its performance so far. It just eats the steel like butter, and it's so much easier than a device such as this. I think we've all tried to drill holes in steel. I've drilled a lot of holes in steel with a battery drill, and you can do it, but there's a couple of fundamental limitations. And the first one is that even on speed number 1, you really don't have enough torque. If you apply a significant amount of pressure, you're always in danger of just stalling the drill. So that's problem number one. And these sort of drills allow you to drill at any angle except friggin' 90 degrees, which is obviously the one you want when it comes to metal work. Holes in steel are obviously not as amenable to being massaged after the fact if they're inaccurate, and they look so crap if the head of the bolt is sitting like that. You know, it's just, it looks awful. So there's a lack of orthogonality constraint in a drill like this. You'll end up drilling anywhere, whereas with a drill like this, it's only going in one direction, and that is totally orthogonal to the surface, and it just makes the finished result, the bolt heads, whatever, they just look so much more pro when the hole is accurate like that. The other thing about these sorts of drills is that you can't really apply sufficient pressure. You've got to remember that the second operative word in drill press is press. The drill press gives you 8 or 10 to 1 worth of mechanical advantage typically. So, you know, you might only be pulling down on the handle like this with 5 kilos of load or something, but there's 40 kilos of load going into the bit. And it's that pressure that allows the drill to do the work in steel. Whereas if you're out here trying to manually just stump up 40 kilos of effort to go into a drill, that's a lot of force for the average person to apply for a protracted period of time. And there tends to be a bit of wobble going on, and that can lead to drill breakage, or the clamp that you've got jury-rigged up can fail. And if it does, and you're putting 40 kilos worth of load into the setup like this, then you're going to go face first into the work, which is never good. And the other thing is, if you're using a really big drill and you press hard, you'll just stall the motor on the drill, and that's going to really reduce its life, because you're forcing a baby like this to do the kind of job that only a grown man can do, and it's going to fail early. So for all these reasons, you're going to need a better setup for home metalwork. In woodworking, I'd suggest something like a drill press is a bit of a luxury. Like, it's a nice to have, but not mandatory. Whereas for metalwork, a mag drill or a drill press is really a fundamental shop tool that you use often. So I guess we should talk then about, should you buy one of these or should you buy a drill press? I actually own 3 drill presses. I've got pretty much the ideal home shop drill press just over here. I've got a more industrial one just behind you at the moment, and I've got one that needs refurbishment over in the other fat cave. So there are pros and cons, right? So I've written them down here. I'll just refer to them a bit. The first limitation on a mag drill is the throat, right? They've got a really small throat, which is the distance from the column in a drill press to the actual drill, right? So the throat here is really only about 30 millimeters, which means that you could certainly put a piece of 50 mil tube down here and clamp it down and drill through the center. That wouldn't be a problem, but there are some items that just will not fit between here and here. And the theory about a mag drill is obviously that you just turn the magnet up, off, pick it up, move it wherever you want, bring it back, clamp it down, and you can basically just put it anywhere. But the throat depth is kind of a limitation in some drilling scenarios. So you'd need to think about the kinds of things that you're going to drill and whether or not a mag drill is going to be better at that or a drill press. The thing about a drill press is they take up a lot of space, right? Whereas this is so compact and portable. So you got to give these the points for compactness and portability. You can just put it over there on a shelf and pull it out when you need it. Whereas a drill press is going to be there and it's going to be taking up space in your home shop all day long. And let's face it, you're not going to use it every day. So there's that. The depth to the table is also kind of significant as well, because you've got 125 millimeters here from the top of the receptacle for the cutter to the work surface. And this drill actually comes with a conventional chuck adapter as well, but obviously when you put that in, you lose a lot of additional space. And this means that if you want to use twist drills, you're going to have to come up with some kind of adapter. You're going to have to use the shorter stubby drills. They'd be much more suitable than your conventional jobber drill set, so you'd have to tool up for them. Full points to Vevor for including the chuck adapter for conventional drills, but just realise that this is an imperfect solution for the twist drills that you already own. Now, with a drill press, you get lots of different speeds, right? You get speeds, I just looked at that one, it's from about 150 to about 2,500 RPM, and you get 13 different speeds, 12 or 13, whatever it is. Anyway, that sounds fantastic in practice, but I'd be happy with 3 speeds. I'd be happy with about 400, and then I'd be happy with about 600, and then I'd be happy with about 1,000. Whereas I actually find the number of speeds that are on offer in a drill press a complete pain in the ass, and there's so much duplication of speeds that are kind of too close for comfort. Like, do we really need both of them kind of thing? Whereas a simple 3-speed job would just be much better. You do only get 1 speed with this mag drill, and that's something to bear in mind. It feels like about 600 RPM or something like that. Anyway, it cuts fantastic with these annular cutters, which we are getting to. The other thing about a drill press is obviously you've got virtually unlimited height available for whatever part you want to stick under it. So that's something to consider as well. The chuck is about here as you're standing up, and you've basically got the whole space down to the floor to stick whatever underneath it to do the drilling. And then I guess if you needed to drill on the side of a piece of, I don't know, the hull of a ship or something, then a mag drill works really well. Speaking of which, I think most DIYers are only ever going to use a mag drill like this, like on a horizontal surface, but you can also use them on columns. So you can drill horizontally on columns at height if you want to, and you can even drill inverted onto the underside of plate or beams or things of this nature. That's unlikely in a DIY environment, but if you ever find yourself doing that, then I would strongly suggest that you strap the damn drill securely to whatever you can, so that if the power fails, the magnet goes off, it doesn't turn into a lethal projectile, okay? And this is the sort of thing that happens all the time, potentially in industrial applications. You can have a power failure at any time. Someone working on the same circuit as you can just trip the breaker, or someone might just unplug your machine because they don't think you're using it. Or they could just trip over the cord and it could just come loose, and all of a sudden someone ends up dead because this falls on them from a height. And obviously you don't want that. The machine comes with one of these straps, which is probably okay, but I'd probably upgrade to a more serious strap than that if I was going to do any work of this nature. This package costs $364. There's a 5% discount code in the description below, so that's going to bring the price to under $350. And the thing that makes this, to me at least, preposterously good value is that the package also comes with 11 of these, which are high-speed steel annular cutters. These things are a flat-out miracle, and every time I speak to someone who's gone from twist drills to annular cutters, they just look at you and go, yeah, I know. It just turns drilling into a completely different experience. It makes it so easy. I'll show you a really big one here that doesn't come with the kit. This is a 50mm annular cutter, and basically it's a hole saw on steroids, right? It's got many more teeth than a twist drill, and the other miracle of it is that obviously it doesn't have to turn all of the material being removed into swarf. Here's the plug that just gets ejected by this spring-loaded center locating pin here. This is the 27mm plug that just gets ejected. So it doesn't have to do all that work of reducing this material into swarf, which is one of the reasons why they just cut like butter. Now, there's a 12mm one. I just priced one of them up, $38. A 24mm one is $55. That's for the entry-level high-speed steel job. It costs about 50% more if you want a cobalt one. So if we said the kit comes with 12 to 27, and if we said the average price as a one-off for each one of those is $45, it would cost you $500 to procure the 11 annular cutters that come with the kit. So it's almost like they're giving you the cutters with a discount for $350 and throwing in the drill for free. Like, that is preposterously good value. There's a few more things you need to know before you just unbox your drill and let rip with an annular cutter. The first one is that there's a pin. You get one pin and 11 cutters, and the pin goes in every cutter before you install it in the machine. It's installed there now in the 27mm cutter. So you drop the pin in the top and then you put the cutter in the receiver. When you do that, it's called a Weldon shank. It's got two flats on it. The two flats need to correspond to the two M10 set screws in the shank, and you need to make sure that they are snugged up nice and tight, because if they come loose in operation, that's a flat-out disaster. So don't omit that step. The kit comes with the right Allen key to do that. If you're getting into this level of home fabrication, you'll have your own Allen keys, I'm sure. You're going to be removing a lot of metal quickly with one of these, and that means you can't run it dry. It's not like a twist drill. You need to use coolant. And to understand the distinction, you really need to understand basic cutting dynamics. And to do that, I'll go back to something we've all done. We've all taken a pocket knife and we've all whittled away at a piece of wood. And as soon as you do this, the blade bites into the wood and you start to form a chip. And then the chip rises up and it hits the cheek of the blade and there's a lot of drag, frictional drag. That's a pain in the ass. It makes it really hard to continue the cut. And this is exactly the problem with every cutting operation that you will ever do. It pertains to whittling, chiseling, planing, cutting with saws, cutting with a lathe, cutting with a milling machine. Everything from the most basic cutting operation to the most advanced has this frictional drag dynamic problem. And the most easy way to overcome the frictional drag is with oil. And oil works really well on a machine like this, which is torque limited. You don't put oil on the metal before you drill it. With a machine like this to keep the drill cool, that's ridiculous. It's not going to be removing metal fast enough to overheat. You don't need to bother. The reason to put the oil on the material before you cut it with a drill like this is to reduce the friction, because you're torque limited, and every amount of frictional drag you can take away from the equation can be added to actually doing the work drilling through the material. You've got a different problem when it comes to a machine like this. It's working really fast, so it's removing material quickly, and that means you need to keep it cool. That's where coolant comes in. The distinction between lubricant and coolant is that coolant is mainly water. You get coolant as a concentrate, you mix it up, it's mainly water. Water has this miraculous ability to remove a lot of heat quickly without very much rise in temperature. So it is spectacularly good at keeping tools cool when they are working really hard. There's a small amount of lubricity as well from the concentrate. It's a soluble oil and it does cut friction somewhat, but its main function is to remove heat. Now, this machine does come with a coolant tank and you can plumb it in. I personally find them a bit cumbersome, so I just choose to mix the coolant up myself and just spray it in while I'm using the other hand to plunge the tool into the job. Plunging the tool is not a two-handed operation, so this works just fine for me, although you might want to use the supplied tank. If you decide a mag drill is the right upgrade for you for your DIY fabrication, then I would flat out hate to see you spending, I don't know, $1,500 or $2,000 on some setup that is really not going to deliver objectively superior performance in the context of DIY home fabrication in the shed. This kit from Vevor absolutely rocks, and the value proposition is outstanding. And you should check it out if you need to drill big fat holes in big thick pieces of metal. Links in the description. And hey, even if you don't want to do that, I hope you've learnt a little bit about fabrication and cutting dynamics and things of that nature along the way. Thanks for joining me. I'll catch you on the next one.